Chapter 2. Unhooking Society's Corset Self. Looking back now, I see I developed true and false senses of self at different stages of my life. Each belief, true and false, formed my character and created patterns of thoughts and behaviors. At any given moment, I was expressing my true self, my self-expressing love frequency, or my false self, myself expressing low frequency. The true-false ratio depended on my experiences on all timelines. Often, false senses of self formed unconsciously to protect me from people, places, and things in my environment. I was forced to give meaning to perceived threats, which formed my identity. I identified with these imagined aspects of self for so long that eventually I believed they were me. Before embarking on my journey of self-realization, I had no idea these senses of self were untrue because they were ingrained ways of being. I just kept on doing the same things over and over without realizing my thoughts, aligned and misaligned, were creating my reality. Infancy. I was attached to my mother's umbilical cord when I was born. Therefore, I believed I was her and she was me. The cord was cut, but I remained close to her, and stress rose if we were apart. I thought we were still one person. She was my sense of self, and I was my needs. I required nutrient-rich liquid to nourish and hydrate me, warmth and comfort to make me feel safe. These were imperative to my survival, and my voice was my survival mechanism. When my parents responded promptly, I felt loved, and my attachment bond to them strengthened. Luckily, the carers in my life were physically, psychologically, and emotionally capable. They detected their evolutionary hardwired impulse to stop me crying and successfully supported me to stop. Thus, my brain did not atrophy from an overproduction of cortisol. Instead, I could use the energy I saved to develop neural pathways to grow and communicate, smiling, babbling, and cooing. The more successful I was at communicating, the more empowered I felt. I was beyond surviving. I was thriving. My sense of self was, I am secure. However, I still experienced trauma. For example, the nurses taught Mum to leave me to cry myself to sleep. Mum often got the timing right, but surely she occasionally got the timing wrong. At these times, I felt unheard. My sense of self was, I am unworthy. At around 9 months of age, I realized I existed separately. I observed Mum physically leaving me. I worried she might never come back and felt separation anxiety. After months of her consistently returning, this anxiety subsided. At this stage, I developed the concept of a separate self. I formed an identity or a picture in my head of how myself looked, sounded, and felt. My sense of self was, I am separate. Toddler. I identified with false senses of self, such as, I am my body, my thoughts, and my possessions. As a toddler, a toy was my toy. I was an extension of that toy, and if someone took it away, it felt physically violated and upset. My sense of self included everything within reach: fingers, bed, book, dad, pencil, and bike. Sharing was not an option. It would be like asking me to share my heart. How could I? It's mine. I developed a strong ego to protect my sense of self, so I behaved egocentrically. The world revolved around me because I did not have an expanded perspective. I only knew my limited surroundings. I was not only my needs, but also my wants, my interests, and my plans. The foot-stamping tantrums and the overuse of the word mine help me meet my increased needs. I believed if I don't have what's mine, I won't exist. At these times, my attachment to what I could not have was so intense that I was incapable of self-soothing. Instead, I relied on skillful, patient adults to teach me. Luckily, they were stable, and my behavior did not trigger their unresolved trauma too much. I want to add that no matter how emotionally intelligent and securely bonded our carers are, there is no way of shielding us from pain. It is part of being human. As we grow up, we experience personal and collective trauma. For example, death, disease, and disconnection. Childhood. Around the age of 5 or 6, I began to realize that I existed in a community. What was happening to the people around me affected me. I started to develop empathy skills. I began to understand that caring for others satisfied my needs too. I learned rules within my family, local playground, and school that required sharing and taking turns. Adults explicitly taught me these rules, allowed me to practice them, monitored my progress with positive reinforcement, and retaught skills where necessary. The rules were consistent across all settings, and I had effective role models. Therefore, I saw the behavior I was trying to learn. My sense of self was, I am a good rule follower. Living in a group required me to master resilient strategies. I needed to bounce back from challenges. I began to succeed in situations that required negotiation and problem solving. I realized that it felt good when another's needs were met as well as mine. When faced with a conflict, I began to mediate with group members to reach favorable outcomes for all involved. When I could not achieve a win-win outcome, I was flexible enough to move on without resentment. With chameleon-style ease, I changed myself depending on different groups' expectations and acted accordingly. My sense of self got conditioned by the people I interacted with, and I began to play roles to feel accepted. Adapting this way is normal child behavior. My sense of self was, I am a daughter, friend, neighbor, student, teacher, team member, child. Adolescence. As a teenager in my early 20s, my sense of self was affected by how I thought others viewed me. I observed my parents, coaches, teachers, community members, and the media to learn what society valued. I learned I was valued if I was pretty, thin, rich, smart, and sporty. I developed a belief that I was not pretty enough, not thin enough, and not rich enough, and not smart enough, and not sporty enough. My resilience became shaky, and I would make things mean more than they needed to mean. I refused to get over things because it felt good being poor me. Why? It satisfied a need. It justified my belief. I'm unworthy. I would wallow in self-pity, create drama, and turn the situation into a story that confirmed my sense of self, which was, I am not enough. This became a habit. My parents let me get away with it because they also identified with this narrative. Therefore, my behavior appeared quite normal. Adulthood. When I became an adult, catalyst after catalyst pointed me to a realization that I was viewing my world through false filters. Fear, lack, victim. And from unrealistic perspectives. White privilege, elitist school, prestigious university. It occurred to me that my habitual thoughts were limiting me, my relations, and my life. Eventually, my false selves were running the show and creating a world that I did not want to live in. So I went on a quest to discover my true self. To realize self, I had to ignore all the false selves I had identified with along the way. These guys were loud and demanding, so it was not easy, but I did it. I share my journey of remembering, aligning to, and embodying my true self with you, hoping that it makes your journey smoother.